Well, hello and a very warm welcome to the 5th episode. Can it really be the 5th episode? In fact, it's the 6th episode of the BA Conference Europe Extra. How time flies. The BA Conference Europe Extra is, of course, the sort of informal, live-streamed bonus content that's broadcasting in the breaks of the BA Conference Europe Extra. And we're streaming live on YouTube, so you can watch this whether or not you're at the conference. So feel free to send the link on to your friends, your colleagues, and the recording will be available about 5 minutes-ish after broadcast. So if there's something interesting and you want to go back and take some notes or share it, please, feel free to sharing is caring, as they say. Share the information. It is live, anything could go wrong. We've not had many technical issues so far, hopefully none that you've seen, touch wood. So we've got that live jeopardy feeling as well. Now, the BA Conference Europe is always very social, and there's so much going on social media. If you haven't yet checked out the hashtag BA2020, whether or not you're at the conference, be sure to tune into that. I've been looking on Twitter and LinkedIn. There's a lot going on there. People are posting like virtual selfies of them watching content. Consider engaging in social media. Even if you don't normally, you can connect with others. It would be so awesome if we could create, a community that meets at the conference, but is sustained, between that conference as well. So it's an opportunity to connect and stay connected even after the conference is over. And then, of course, hopefully we'll see each other in person at the BA Conference Europe 2021. We have so much coming up for you today, viewer. In this session, we've got 3 segments. We're going to be talking about impact mapping. We're going to be talking about being an Agile BA at scale. And we're going to be talking about visual meaning and visualization for shared meaning. 3 fantastic segments. So timing is tight, so we'll get straight on to our first guests. First up, we have a 2-minute taster of what's going to be a fantastic session on impact mapping. Darren Moorghen and Matt Heyhoe of Heyhoe.com are going to deliver this as a workshop on the 28th of September, and tickets are still available, so you could get yourself a place on that. So, Darren and Matt, over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Darren Moorghen, Lead Business Analyst at Heyhoe.com. And this is my colleague Matt Heyhoe. We're here just to give you a little bit of an intro into our impact mapping session, which we're running at BA Conference 2020. Matt, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Darren. Hi, my name is Matthew Heyhoe, and as you may have noticed, my last name is very similar to the company that I work for, and it's the joke that never stops giving. As business analysts, we always want to know what the problem is that we're trying to solve. And I think the problem that we're trying to solve with this workshop is what happens when workshops don't give you lots of options, lots of ideas. We've all probably been in that place where there's people with different agendas trying to solve different solutions and have got their own agendas that they want to push. The framework of impact mapping is really simple, just like most things, it's elegant, it's nice and basic, and not brain surgery, but it means that everybody understands what we're trying to do, can pull in the same way, understand everybody's assumption, and keep testing back to actually see if we solve things. So that's what impact mapping is, and that's what it solves. But Darren, do you want to explain what the day will be like?
Yeah, so what we'll do is we generally just start with a bit of theory, so obviously some introductions from Matt and myself, how we've used it previously, and we'll explain the framework, what we believe in. We're best at learning through practical hands-on stuff. That's what we like to do. So there's a few exercises in there. We will definitely have time for people to discuss and debate the merits of the session, and we'll make it as interactive as possible. We'll do a real-time retro as well. So if we need to pivot during the session, people want to learn about a certain thing, then we'll do that as well. And just lastly, Matt, what are the key takeaways that people will get from coming to our session?
So we want people to be able to go away with enough skill and enough confidence to be able to run a workshop themselves. To be honest, I really love feedback from everybody as to how they've used it and how they've advanced it and made it their own kind of thing. So that's what we're going to do on the day. It'd be lovely to see you all there, and looking forward to meeting everybody. Take care, everybody. See you soon. Bye.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Darren and Matt, for that really interesting taster. And do be sure to check out their session on the 28th of September. It's on the main conference agenda. And yeah, attend if you can. Sounds like some really, really useful and interesting and pragmatic and practical stuff there. So now we're straight on to our next topic. We're joined by two fantastic live guests to talk about a really tricky topic. Agile has been a perennial debate in the BA community for, decade or decades probably. And being an Agile BA at scale seems to be increasingly a question that people are asking. So it's my pleasure to introduce Lynn Girvin, a very well-known speaker and of course co-author of Agile and Business Analysis, and Will Izzard, who are both from CMC, and Lynn and Will are speaking later today as well. So Lynn and Will, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Fantastic, thank you. So Lynn, Will, you've probably been asked this a million times before, but it seems to be a common question in our community around that old chestnut that we hear occasionally, that there is no role for a BA in Agile. I think I know what your answer to this would be, but what would your take on that be?
I think this is stemmed from the implementation of Scrum, where there isn't explicitly a BA role. I think what I would say to that is true, and also it's false in terms of, is there a need for BA in Agile? If we're talking about a specific development team of 5 to 7 people or 7 to 9 people, then maybe not a full-time role for a BA. That doesn't mean there isn't business analysis or shouldn't be business analysis. So is there a role for BA in Agile? Absolutely, but it's probably embedded within that team and maybe not a specialist role. I think as you're looking more widely and you're scaling, then I think there definitely is a role for Agile, BAs in Agile. And let's not forget, actually, a role for BA in Agile, I'd like to turn that around. And is there a role for BAs to be Agile?
Yes.
Absolutely. Business analysis is still needed, and I think there's definitely a need for BAs to be more agile in their mindset and the way they think, irrespective of whether they're working within a development team.
That's really interesting there, Lynn, about that mindset shift. And actually, so that implies that you could be an agile BA even if you're within the constraints of a waterfall or hybrid project. You could actually be acting with agility even if you're constrained in some way. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely, and I would say the same for change management as well, and people in change roles.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If the question is there was no need for a BA, you hear the same thing about change management as well. And there's no explicit role for change in scaled agile approaches, but we think it's quite important, as our talk later demonstrates.
Absolutely, and it's sort of interesting because I mean, moving on to that topic about scaling, I mean, if the old chestnut was there's no BA in Agile, and hopefully as a community we're over that or are getting over it, the new chestnut is scaling, and I see in the clients I work with lots of frameworks, and I'm not referring to any specific framework, and I see different implementations of those frameworks, and some might see those frameworks as being quite bureaucratic in some cases. What's your view on scaling and how it affects change in the people aspect and that bureaucracy element of it? So, I mean, Will, what would your view on that be?
So it depends what we mean by change. To this day, we hear lots of different definitions of it. And as change practitioners, we're often having to describe from grassroots what it is. And it's not change control, request for change management from an ITIL perspective. What we are talking about is a set of tools and processes to help the people side of, I'll use project in a sort of generic sort of sense, something bringing about a change. So we mean behaviors, we mean people, we mean the things they do, getting into culture. Might be internal, might be external, might be a general public. But for us, and scaling and the effect on change, it's about balancing the focus on sprints, which traditionally are fairly short duration, balancing that with how long it takes changes to embed, which is more of a human thing, and it often takes longer, I think, than we'd like it to. But it's just one of those things that habits take longer to form, and that's really what we're after. So applying a focus, that's for us at that level. That's our approach.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Will, and I was nodding away emphatically there, and I was thinking about even some of the the products and services I use as a consumer, where it's really clear that they're releasing minor changes and features very frequently, but they're things I don't care about, and you get to that kind of yes, I know you can release every hour, but I don't want you to change my work every hour type of thing. So do you think there's potentially an inherent conflict between the cadence and the pace at which change can be implemented and the cadence and pace at which change perhaps could be effectively implemented? Is there a clash between those two?
Yeah, I think they are probably put in some sort of creative tension. Is probably a good way of thinking about it, because it's stressful. Whether we like change, whether we think that we're good at change, or whether we're folks who say no, I can't stand change. We all have a threshold. We have an individual threshold of when it's too much for us, and that will be linked to how well we deal with uncertainty in the brain more than anything else. And so, yeah, constant updates. It's like another change. Suddenly, it's unfamiliar again, and getting used to it. It's still our biology. And I think it just struggles to keep up sometimes. Yeah,
and I think there's I don't know if you've found this, Will, but elements of change fatigue as well, where people are like, look, I don't care what it is, I just want it to stay. I just want to be sitting in the same seat for 2 weeks this time, that kind of thing as well.
I just want to know where I am for a couple of weeks. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So making changes really tiny, that helps, but it doesn't get away from the very rapid sprint versus our biology kind of conflict.
Yeah, fantastic. So Lynn, moving on to the sort of framework, and I know, on LinkedIn it's always a controversial, for any kind of scaling framework is controversial, but what, the bureaucracy element, because there is it feels like there's a danger that if you scale something badly, you almost get the worst of all the frameworks. So what's your view on that? Is it possible to scale Agile without becoming a bureaucratic governance nightmare?
I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think if you're going to scale it, then start small and then scale. Get it right. Otherwise, you're scaling bad practice and bad behaviours. I think there's a tendency for Agile to focus on technical delivery. And I think that's where some of the change and that governance gets lost a little bit. I think the minute you scale, it's more about culture and ways of working and scaling and changing processes than it is about scaling the technical deliverables. It's the environment around that deliverable, that structure, that cadence that really has to be there to support them. And a lot of the scaled Agile frameworks don't concern themselves with considering the change aspects in that, in terms of, and also the increase of deliverables on the customer, but also the change within the organization, which is often quite fast when they're scaled.
Yes, those cultural elements and the pace of change externally and internally, and that cultural element is such an important one, isn't it? Because I suppose if an organisation is traditionally command and control with 3-year budgetary cycles, that's a cultural change at a very senior level as well as on the ground, and I think, I don't know if you find this, Lynn, but I find sometimes there's almost a perception that, well, the change is on the ground and the change is in the change team, but it's like, well, no, it's got to be throughout the organisation. Would you agree with that?
I definitely would, and I think we can throw in the term business agility here, which I think something that obviously I care about deeply. And I think this is the ability for the organization to be adaptive. It's not about applying Agile at a technical development team level. It's about applying Agile from an organizational level. It's about where a decision's making, having decentralized decision-making frameworks, empowering people and teams, creating levels of leadership across the organization. In fact, that's why I really love the keynote just now when he mentioned challenge up and support down. What a fantastic phrase. And I wholeheartedly would agree with that. And one of the things that Will and I talk about in our talk is a bit about this top down, bottom up, middle out. And I know this is something you've phrased as well, Adrian, in the past, but we talk about it from the scaled Agile point of view. You've got to have your vision. You've got to know where the organization is trying to go. You do need to do the iterative development processes to learn and bring that innovation in. But in the middle of all of that is the glue. It's that iterative development that actually is the embedding of that change at the incremental level, the incremental change that happens through multiple small deliverables. And that often gets forgotten about. And these two things become very disjointed from one another. And that's where you need that Agile governance. And I use governance in the light framework, not in a bureaucratic framework here.
Yeah. And it is interesting, isn't it? The word governance, like I can feel myself slightly, like governance, like I can't say it without, but actually, like governance doesn't have to be a bad thing, and it doesn't have to be an inhibitor. I mean, I think one thing that I've found, I don't know if you folks have found this, but like recently, because of the COVID crisis, I've seen organisations, and in fact organisations I've been involved with, have made decisions quicker, have carried out experimentation far faster than they ever would have done if that external thing wasn't there, to the point where I've seen some organisations do things where I'm like, wow, that's awesome, and I don't think you ever would have done that if it wasn't for COVID. So it's sort of interesting, isn't it, that maybe the environment is actually pushing our organisations to be agile, to have organisational agility, because they have to survive.
Yeah, that's a really good
totally
point,
agree.
Adrian.
Oh, sorry, John answer that one.
So that's a very good point, Adrian. But it's almost like a silver lining in a terrible situation. And I think, for me, talking purely from a change practitioner perspective in a BA world, so thank you for letting me in, is that it shows us what you can do when the stakes are high enough, I think, when there is consequence, and when there are enough people. I mean, it's everybody kind of feeling in the same boat.
Yeah.
So I think, so yes, a lack of bureaucracy, a lack of governance. Well, I have a similar reaction to those words that you do, I think. But at the end of the day, if it's an organization, a society, the world, it's, as soon as it's a human activity system, it's a complex thing. So some kind of organization and relationship between things is needed.
Yeah.
But if this has shown us anything, it's important to put in motion, sort of front and center in what we do. I think that's one of the things that has really helped those organizations that have adapted and become agile.
Quite right. Get that movement going. So, okay. So my final question to you both is, like, in 30 seconds or less, a very unfair question, but in 30 seconds or less, without spoiling too much from your upcoming presentation, if there was one takeaway that you particularly want people to get from your presentation, what would it be? And Lynn, I'll go to you first on this one.
I think it's that there is no such thing as an IT project. They're all change projects, and business analysis and change practitioners play a very important role. Fantastic.
I completely agree with that one. And Will?
I think so. So one of the things you'll see this afternoon, Mind the Gap, we talk about traditional program management, and it there's a lot of sort of block up with it, and it can be a bit heavyweight, but there are some very good things in it. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Absolutely. So no such thing as an IT project, only change projects, and don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just because the red tape is bad doesn't mean that governance can't work if it's appropriate. So fantastic. I'm sure people want to check out your session, which is at 3 p.m. today, Minding the Gap, incorporating the change agenda into scaled agile. And I'm sure people want to follow you, stay in touch. What's the best way for people to follow your work and stay in touch? So Will, how can people connect with you?
It's very easy. It's at Consult CMC, and that applies to Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
We've also got a website, which is www.consultcmc.com, and where you can find Will and I on LinkedIn as well.
Fantastic. So LinkedIn, the website, or the socials. So, well, Lynn, I know we could talk for hours about this because we have in the past after physical events. So thank you so much for taking time to be here today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Fantastic. Well, some really, really interesting insight from Will and Lynn there. So do make a point of checking out their session. Remember, if you can't attend live, if you've got a session clash, well, in 48 hours the recording will be available, so you can go and check out their sage wisdom after the event as well. So now we just about have time to squeeze one more video in. Have you ever found it difficult to convey complex information? I know I have. Let's face it, we're often dealing with really complex, messy situations, and although we've got all sorts of models, sometimes it's difficult to make those models meaningful. I could draw a BPMN diagram, which would mean something to some folks, but it wouldn't mean anything to other folks. If you've ever had that experience, you're in luck. Steve Whitla, who is author of this fantastic book, Visualizing Business Transformation. If you haven't seen it, check it out. I've just noticed I have a sticky, this is a dangerous thing to do, live viewer. I have a sticky note in here. Okay, so the diagram that I refer to a lot is on page 5. So if you get the book, look on page 5, and it has a diagram about how abstract or concrete something is and how free-form or constrained it is. It's a really, really useful diagram there. I won't zoom in too much on it because I don't want to breach Steve's copyright on that. So he's speaking here at the conference, and he's agreed to give us a little bit of an insight into his session. So Steve, over to you.
Hi guys, it's Steve Whitla here from Visual Meaning. Have you ever experienced a situation where you've spent lots of time, either yourself or with the team, building out a big complex model of how something works? An organizational system, an enterprise architecture maybe, a capability model, a business model, and you've mapped it all out and you've ended up with something that looks a lot like a big bowl of spaghetti. And you're really proud because it's really meaningful to you and to your team because you spent so much time doing all the analysis to figure out how it all fits together. And then you go out and show this to your main stakeholders and to your audiences, and they just really don't want to look at it because it's just too complex, too complicated. I think this is a big problem that hasn't really been explored properly. I'm not aware of any proper methodology for how you deal with this situation, but it's something that we do a lot of in our work here in Visual Meaning. The studio behind me, when there are folks here and we're not out because of a pandemic, are busily making visual models, more meaningful models of complex organizational systems. And the 3 areas that we draw on the most in our work are, firstly, obviously visual design itself. This is a working studio. Then we draw a lot on systems thinking methodologies for what the underlying structure should be for the pictures that we create. And then there's this third aspect that doesn't seem to get much of a look in it's not even just in business analysis or related areas, it's in business in general. And that's the whole area of cognitive science. So how does thinking work? How are our brains tuned to work when we read complex information, when we look at diagrams? What's actually going on inside our brains? I want to tell you a little experiment that was done about 20 years ago now that I think is really insightful and gives us a very interesting principle that I think is incredibly helpful when you're looking at, visualizing anything, to be honest, but particularly visualizing complex systems when you've got lots of elements that you're trying to put around. Because you see, part of the problem when you're creating a visualization of an operating model or a business model, the concepts that you're trying to articulate are abstract, right, by necessity. What is a capability? We can describe that in words, but what does a capability look like? You know? What does a service look like? What does a system look like? It's an abstract concept. So how do you visualize it when it's an abstract concept? And we get the sense that these are two completely different worlds. You know, there's the world of physical things. You know, I can pick up things and I can touch them and look at them. And then there's this other world that we deal with where we have to deal with jargon because you can't really touch those things. You can't see them, you can't feel with them. But this experiment kind of puts pay to that a little bit. What they did was they came up with this list of sentences, some of which didn't make any sense, and some of them did make sense. And they got all these participants to listen to a sentence. And if the sentence was something that made sense, they had to push a button. Except, of course, that's nothing to do with what the experiment was about. The experiment was actually about the location of the button. You see, some of the sentences, the sensible sentences, were about actions that you would do away from you. You know, I pushed a drawer closed. And if the button was further away, what they found was that the reaction time was faster. So I'm quicker at recognizing that a sentence is real when the location of the physical action I'm actually doing conforms to the nature of the sentence. You know, I took a compliment. That's a kind of towards action. So if the button was here, you actually responded faster. And that was what was so interesting about this, was that it didn't actually matter whether the sentence was about something physical, you know, I opened a drawer, or it was about something conceptual, you know, I offered an idea, I took a service, I accepted a compliment. What do those things look? Well, what do those things look like? They don't physically look like anything. And the principle this points to is the fact that everything is a thing as far as your brain's concerned. It doesn't matter how abstract it is. This whole divide that we've got between the abstract world and the physical world, as far as your brain is concerned, is exactly the same. And we actually take advantage of this a lot when we're doing visual training, where we get people to draw all over little physical objects and then start putting them together in different combinations to get this point across that no matter how abstract a thing is, it's still a thing. You know, I can take this little block, and if I write on this something abstract, like one of the words I just used, let's say capability. If I write the word capability on here, I have a capability because this is a model of something that exists out in the world. No matter how abstract it is, I'm still treating it, my brain still treats it as a thing. Why is this useful for visualization? Because as soon as you flick your brain into seeing everything as a thing, you can start asking questions about what kind of thing? Is it a thing with edges? Is it a sort of amorphous thing, like a liquidy sort of thing? If it's liquidy, is it kind of viscous? Is it gaseous? And that changes how you see the abstract thing that you're talking about. If it's a really solid, clear, definite concept, it should probably have a very strong outline when it appears in your PowerPoint slide. If it's very similar to another category of thing, then it should probably appear very similar in your system model. Is it related to a cluster of things that are somehow have some sort of interaction with each other? Well, they should probably be close together. If I say that this concept over here supports this, you know, our capability model supports our business case. Well, look what I'm doing with my hands. It supports our business, which means it needs to be underneath it. Because the way we talk about things, no matter how abstract they are, is still treating them as things. And that's why I think we need to make more use of cognitive science in the way we represent things in business. If this sounds interesting, come along to my session. I'm going to be talking all about it. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Well, that is all the time we have for this episode of BA Conference Europe Extra. Keep the social media updates coming up. Remember to tweet with the hashtag BA2020. That's all from us. See you again at 12:15.